The blood from Delilah Evans' split knuckles dripped onto the dusty wooden planks of Ventura's general store porch as she glared at the crowd of would-be helpers. No one in town had ever seen a woman punch a wooden post so hard out of frustration. And now they were all rushing to assist the newcomer who clearly wanted nothing of their charity. Travis Galloway watched from across the street, leaning against the hitching post outside the saloon, his weathered Stetson pulled low against the California sun. Unlike the others gathering around the stubborn woman with her broken-down wagon and lame horse, he didn't rush over with offers of help or sympathy. Instead, he simply straightened his tall frame, adjusted his gun belt, and walked to the livery stable without a word. Delilah's voice carried across the main street of Ventura. "I said I don't need help. Just point me to where I can buy supplies and I'll be on my way." The shopkeeper, old Mr. Peterson, tried again. "Miss, your wagon axle is cracked clean through. You ain't going nowhere until that's fixed proper." "I can fix it myself," she insisted, though anyone with eyes could see the repair was beyond a single person's capability, especially with a bandaged hand. Travis emerged from the livery leading a sturdy draft horse. Without acknowledging Delilah or the onlookers, he walked directly to her wagon, unhitched her exhausted mare, and replaced it with his borrowed draft horse. "What do you think you're doing?" Delilah demanded, marching toward him with fury in her eyes. Her chestnut hair had mostly escaped its pins, framing a face both beautiful and fierce. Travis didn't even look up as he secured the harness. "Moving your wagon to Barton's smithy," he said simply, his voice low and unhurried. "Sun's getting high. Horse needs water." "I didn't ask for your help," she snapped, reaching for the reins. Travis finally met her gaze, his deep blue eyes calm against her fiery brown ones. "Didn't offer it." He clicked to the horse and the wagon began to move, the broken axle scraping ominously. It was 1878, and Ventura was transforming from a rough frontier settlement into a proper town. The Southern Pacific Railroad was still 2 years from reaching them, but prosperity had already begun to change the face of the community. For Delilah Evans, newly arrived from Boston with nothing but determination and secrets, the California coastal town represented her last chance at a new beginning. Travis Galloway had been in Ventura for 5 years, arriving after the war in a long stretch of drifting. He'd built a small but respected cattle operation outside town and kept mostly to himself. People knew better than to ask about his past. As Travis led the wagon down the street with Delilah stalking angrily behind him, Sheriff Wilson raised an eyebrow at the spectacle. "Galloway finally met his match," he muttered to the deputy beside him. "Never seen 2 more stubborn people in all my days." The blacksmith's forge radiated heat as Travis guided the wagon inside. Barton, a burly man with arms like tree trunks, looked up from his anvil. "What have we got here, Galloway?" "Broken axle. Needs replacing," Travis said, already unhitching the draft horse. Delilah pushed her way between them. "I can pay for the repairs myself," she insisted, pulling a small purse from her skirt pocket. "And I don't need anyone's charity." Barton assessed the damage. "This'll take a few days, madam. That's not charity talking, that's fact." The color drained from her face. "A few days. I need to be on my way by tomorrow." Travis led the draft horse to water. "Town's got one hotel. Mrs. Reynolds runs it clean." Delilah seemed momentarily defeated. "Fine. I'll return tomorrow to check on progress." She gathered a carpet bag from the wagon bed. "Is there somewhere I can stable my mare?" "Already took her to Doc Simmons," Travis said. "He treats animals too." Her eyes narrowed. "You had no right." Horse was favoring her right foreleg. "Needed tending." Travis wiped his hands on his jeans. Doc'll send his bill to the hotel. Delilah opened her mouth to protest further, then closed it. Without another word, she turned and headed toward the hotel, back straight and head high despite the dust coating her once fine traveling dress. Barton chuckled after she was out of earshot. She's a firecracker, that one. What's her story? Travis shrugged. Not my business. But his eyes followed her retreating figure with unmistakable interest. The Ventura Hotel stood 2 stories tall, its white clapboard exterior freshly painted. Mrs. Reynolds, a widow who ran the establishment with military precision, looked up as Delilah entered. "You must be the young lady from the wagon incident," she said, adjusting her spectacles. "Word travels fast in Ventura," Delilah sighed. "Apparently so. I need a room for a few nights." "Of course, dear. And may I suggest a hot bath? It does wonders after a long journey." For the first time since arriving in Ventura, Delilah's expression softened. "A bath sounds heavenly, thank you." Once in her room with the door firmly locked, Delilah allowed herself to collapse onto the bed. The journey from Boston had been arduous, filled with delays and expenses she hadn't anticipated. Her funds were dwindling dangerously, and now this setback with the wagon threatened to derail her plans entirely. She pulled a worn letter from her pocket and read it again, though she'd long memorized every word. It contained directions to a small property outside Ventura, her inheritance from an uncle she'd never met. It was her only hope for a fresh start, away from the scandal and heartbreak she'd left behind. The hot bath did indeed work wonders, and by evening Delilah felt almost human again. Her bandaged hand still throbbed where she'd struck the post in frustration, but at least she was clean and somewhat rested. She made her way downstairs to the hotel's small dining room, aware of the curious glances from the other guests. Travis Galloway sat alone at a corner table, a plate of untouched food before him. He seemed deep in thought, staring into a cup of coffee as if it held answers to questions he hadn't yet asked. When Delilah entered, he glanced up briefly, then returned to his contemplation. Delilah deliberately chose a table as far from his as possible. She ordered a simple meal and tried to ignore the whispers that followed her. Small towns where all the same newcomers were curiosities to be dissected and discussed. Halfway through her meal, a shadow fell across her table. She looked up to find Travis standing there, his tall frame blocking the lamplight. "Your mare's leg is infected," he said without preamble. "Doc says she needs rest. 2 weeks minimum." Delilah set down her fork. "I don't have 2 weeks, not asking if you do." He placed a small packet on the table. "Medicine for her. Apply twice daily." Before she could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving his meal largely untouched. The door closed quietly behind him as he stepped into the night. Mrs. Reynolds appeared at Delilah's elbow. "That man's a puzzle," she said, refilling Delilah's water glass. "Been here 5 years and hardly speaks more words than you just heard. But there's not a person in Ventura who wouldn't trust him with their life." "I'm not interested in puzzles," Delilah replied, though her eyes lingered on the door where Travis had disappeared. "Of course not, dear." Mrs. Reynolds smiled knowingly. More coffee. The next morning dawned clear and hot, typical for early summer in Southern California. Delilah rose early, determined to check on her wagon and horse. She found her way to Doc Simmons' small veterinary practice behind his human medical office. Her mare nickered softly when she entered the stable. The horse's right foreleg was wrapped in clean bandages, and she seemed comfortable enough in the roomy stall. "Good morning, Miss Evans." Doc Simmons emerged from a back room, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Your girl here is responding well to treatment, but as Mr. Galloway likely told you, she needs rest." "So I heard." Delilah stroked the mare's nose. "I can't afford to wait that long, doctor. Is there any way to speed her recovery?" The doctor shook his head. "Pushing her too soon could cripple her permanently. You seem like someone who cares for her animals. I'd hate to see you make that mistake." Delilah's shoulders sagged slightly. "You're right, of course. I'll have to find another solution." She glanced around the stable. "What do I owe you for her care?" "It's been settled," Doc Simmons said, turning to mix some medicine. "What do you mean, settled?" "Mr. Galloway took care of it." The doctor didn't look up from his work. "Said to put it on his account." Anger flashed through Delilah. "I never asked for that. I can pay my own debts. You'll have to take that up with him." Doc Simmons handed her a small jar. "This is salve for your hand. Looks painful." Delilah had almost forgotten her injured knuckles. "Thank you, but no charge for that," he interrupted with a smile. "Consider it a welcome to Ventura." From the veterinary office, Delilah marched straight to the blacksmith shop. The heat inside was stifling, but she barely noticed as she scanned the space for her wagon. Barton was hammering at something on his anvil, sweat pouring down his face. He looked up as she approached. "Morning, Miss Evans. Your wagon's coming along. The axle was worse than I thought, though." "How long?" she asked, dreading the answer. 4, maybe 5 days. I've sent to Santa Barbara for a proper replacement part." Delilah's heart sank. 5 more days meant nearly all her remaining money would go to the hotel. "I see. Thank you for your efforts." As she turned to leave, Barton called after her. "If you're looking for Galloway, he rode out to his ranch at dawn, said he had calves to brand." "I'm not looking for Mr. Galloway," she said stiffly. Though finding him had been her next plan, Barton shrugged. "If you say so. His place is about 5 miles west of town. Follow the creek if you change your mind." Delilah spent the rest of the morning exploring Ventura. The town was larger than she'd expected, with several streets of businesses and homes spreading out from the central plaza. The ocean was visible from the higher points, a glittering blue expanse that seemed to promise freedom and possibility. By midday, she'd made a decision. She couldn't afford to wait in town for days while her money dwindled. Her uncle's property was supposedly about 3 miles outside Ventura to the north. She would have to find it on foot. She returned to the hotel to collect the few items she'd need. The letter with directions, a small canteen, and her father's old revolver. The weapon was more for her peace of mind than any real expectation of danger, but the wilderness around Ventura was still wild enough to harbor predators of both the animal and human variety. Mrs. Reynolds frowned when Delilah announced she was going for a short walk in the countryside. Alone. "That's not advisable, Miss Evans. The terrain can be treacherous if you don't know it, and the sun is merciless this time of year." "I'll be fine," Delilah insisted. "I'm stronger than I look." The older woman seemed unconvinced but didn't press further. "At least take a proper hat. That bonnet won't keep the sun off." Armed with a borrowed wide-brimmed hat and her few supplies, Delilah set out. The directions in her uncle's letter seemed straightforward. Follow the north road out of town until the Split Oak, then west across the creek and up the ridge. The property should be visible from there, a small cabin with a fenced garden and a view of the ocean in the distance. The walk was pleasant enough at first. The road was well traveled, and a gentle breeze kept the heat from becoming unbearable. Delilah felt a sense of purpose with each step, moving closer to the fresh start she desperately needed. After about an hour, she reached what must be the Split Oak, a massive tree that had been struck by lightning years ago, creating 2 distinct trunks from one base. Here, she turned west as directed, leaving the road behind. The terrain immediately became more challenging. The gentle hills gave way to steeper slopes, and the soft grasses were replaced by scrubby brush that caught at her skirts. The creek mentioned in the letter was visible in the distance, but reaching it meant picking her way down a rocky incline. By the time she reached the water, Delilah was sweating profusely and beginning to regret her impulsive decision. She knelt by the creek to refill her canteen and splash water on her face. As she rose, a movement in the brush across the water caught her attention. A coyote stood watching her, its lean body tense and alert. Delilah froze, her heart racing. She'd heard about coyotes but had never encountered one. Were they dangerous to humans? She couldn't remember. The animal took a step toward the creek, and Delilah instinctively reached for the revolver in her pocket. Before she could draw it, a gunshot cracked through the air. The coyote yelped and disappeared into the brush. Coyotes don't usually bother people, a familiar voice drawled from behind her. That one was just curious. Delilah whirled to find Travis Galloway sitting atop a sorrel gelding a few yards away, a rifle resting across his saddle. "Did you follow me?" she demanded, embarrassment and relief battling for dominance. "No," he dismounted smoothly. "This is Galloway land. You're trespassing." There was no accusation in his tone, merely statement of fact. Delilah pulled out her uncle's letter. "I'm looking for the Evans property. It should be just over that ridge according to this." Travis took the letter and scanned it. His expression changed subtly, so subtly she almost missed it. "Henry Evans was your uncle. You knew him. Everyone around here knew old Henry." Travis handed the letter back. "He died last winter. Pneumonia." "Yes, I know. His lawyer wrote to me in Boston." Delilah looked toward the ridge. "The property is mine now." Travis studied her for a long moment. "That ridge is steeper than it looks from here. Another hour's walk at least. Sun'll be getting low by then." "I'll manage," she said, though her feet were already aching in her impractical shoes. Without a word, Travis led his horse to a large rock, creating a natural mounting block. He looked at her expectantly. "I've never ridden astride," Delilah admitted, eyeing the saddle dubiously. "Today's a good day to learn." He held out a hand. "Unless you'd prefer walking back to town in the dark." Pride warred with practicality. Finally, Delilah sighed and placed her hand in his. His grip was firm and calloused as he helped her mount. Once she was settled in the saddle, he swung up behind her, his chest warm against her back. "Hold the horn," he instructed, reaching around her to take the reins. His breath tickled her ear, sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. The horse moved forward at Travis's gentle urging, picking its way carefully up the slope. Delilah tried to maintain some distance between their bodies, but the motion of the horse made this impossible. She was acutely aware of his strength, of the arm that occasionally brushed against her waist when the terrain required a tighter grip on the reins. "Why are you helping me?" she asked after several minutes of silence. "I've made it clear I don't want charity." "Not charity," he replied. "Neighborly. We're not neighbors yet. We'll be if you're claiming Henry's place." The horse navigated around a large boulder. "It borders my south pasture." This information gave Delilah pause. "How well did you know my uncle?" "Well enough." There was something in his tone that suggested a deeper story, but he offered nothing more. They crested the ridge, and Delilah caught her breath. Below them, nestled against the hillside, stood a small but sturdy cabin. Beyond it, the land rolled gently down to a creek lined with cottonwoods. In the far distance, the Pacific Ocean glittered in the afternoon sun. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Henry thought so. Travis guided the horse down the slope toward the cabin. "Spent 20 years building it up from nothing." As they drew closer, Delilah could see that the cabin was well constructed but in need of attention. The small garden beside it was overgrown with weeds, and one of the corral fence posts had fallen. Travis reined the horse to a stop in front of the cabin. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Delilah down. Her legs felt wobbly after the ride, and she gripped his shoulders for support longer than strictly necessary. "Thank you," she said, stepping back quickly. "I can manage from here." Travis raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she approached the cabin. The door was secured with a simple latch. Inside, dust motes danced in the sunlight streaming through the windows. The furniture was basic but solid: a table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair by the stone fireplace, a bed built into one corner with a straw tick mattress. "It's been empty since Henry passed," Travis said from the doorway. "Some of us have checked on it occasionally, kept the roof from leaking." "Some of us, neighbors. Henry was well liked." Delilah ran a finger along the mantel, collecting dust. "I never met him. He and my father had a falling out before I was born. I didn't even know he existed until the lawyer's letter arrived." Travis nodded as if this explained something. "Henry mentioned a brother back east, said they were too stubborn to reconcile." "That sounds like my father," Delilah said with a sad smile. "He died last year, never spoke of his brother, not even at the end." A comfortable silence fell between them as Delilah explored the cabin. It was small but intelligently designed, with plenty of built-in storage. A ladder led to a loft space that contained only a small cot and a trunk. "It needs work," Travis observed, "but it's solid." "Henry built to last." Delilah nodded, already cataloging the tasks before her. "Clean everything. Check the chimney. Plant a garden. Learn how to survive alone in the wilderness." It was overwhelming but also exhilarating. "I should get you back to town," Travis said eventually. "Not safe out here after dark for someone who doesn't know the land." Reality crashed back. "My wagon and horse are still in town. I have supplies there I'll need. We can fetch them once they're repaired." Travis stepped outside, giving her space to take a final look around. Delilah followed, pulling the cabin door closed behind her. "I'm not sure I can afford to stay in the hotel that long. My funds are limited." Travis considered this as he checked his horse's saddle. "There's a widow in town, Mrs. Larson. She takes in boarders for less than the hotel charges, includes meals." "I don't need," wasn't offering help, he cut in, that now familiar phrase carrying a hint of humor this time. "Just information." The ride back to town was quiet. Delilah was lost in thoughts of all that needed to be done, all the challenges ahead. Travis seemed content with silence, guiding the horse with minimal movement. As the buildings of Ventura came into view, Delilah finally spoke. "Why did you pay Doc Simmons for my horse's care?" Travis took so long to answer that she thought he might not have heard. Finally, he said, "Henry would have wanted his niece looked after." "I can look after myself," she said, but the words lacked their earlier fire. "Never said you couldn't." They reached the edge of town just as the sun was setting, painting the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Travis stopped at the livery stable, dismounting first before helping Delilah down. "Mrs. Larson's place is 2 streets over, blue house with white trim," he said, taking the reins of his horse. "Tell her I sent you." "Mr. Galloway," Delilah began, then hesitated. "Travis, thank you for today. I would have been in a difficult situation without your intervention." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Wasn't intervention, just happened to be riding my property line." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and led his horse into the stable, leaving Delilah standing in the gathering dusk, wondering what kind of man acted with such kindness while steadfastly refusing to acknowledge it. Mrs. Larson proved to be a cheerful woman in her 50s who welcomed Delilah with open arms. "Any friend of Travis Galloway is welcome in my home," she declared, showing Delilah to a small but comfortable room. "That man saved my bacon after my Albert passed." Helped me set up this boarding house when I couldn't make ends meet with just the laundry service. He seems to help a lot of people, Delilah observed, setting down her carpetbag. Mrs. Larson nodded. Never makes a fuss about it either. Just does what needs doing. She patted Delilah's arm. Supper's in an hour, dear. You look like you could use a good meal. The next few days fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings, Delilah checked on her mare and wagon, both slowly healing and being repaired. Afternoons, she explored Ventura, gathering supplies and information about farming and ranching from anyone willing to share. Evenings, she joined Mrs. Larson and her other boarders for lively meals full of local gossip and stories. Travis was conspicuously absent. According to Town Talk, he'd returned to his ranch and was busy with seasonal cattle work. Delilah told herself she was relieved not to have to deal with his confusing mix of aloofness and assistance. On the fourth day, a letter arrived for her delivered by a young boy who said the cowboy had paid him to bring it. Inside was a roughly drawn map of the area between town and her uncle's property, with water sources, landmarks, and potential hazards clearly marked. No signature, no note. Just practical information she desperately needed. That evening, as Delilah sat on Mrs. Larson's porch watching the sunset, Sheriff Wilson stopped by. He was a weathered man with kind eyes who clearly took his responsibilities seriously. "Evening, Miss Evans. Heard you're planning to take over Henry's place." "That's right," she confirmed. "Once my wagon and horse are ready." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "It's rough country for a woman alone." Henry managed because he'd been living that life for decades. "I'm aware of the challenges," Delilah said, straightening her spine. "I'm prepared to work hard." "Never doubted that, madam." Sheriff Wilson leaned against the porch railing. "Just wanted to let you know the community's here if you need it. Folks respected Henry. They'll respect his kin, too." "Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate the sentiment, but I've always handled my affairs independently." He studied her for a moment. "Independence is good. Stubbornness that gets you killed isn't. No shame in accepting a helping hand when the need arises." After he left, Delilah remained on the porch, pondering his words. All her life, she'd been taught that a lady should be decorative, accomplished in drawing-room arts, and ultimately dependent on the men in her life. When scandal had forced her to flee Boston, she'd sworn never to be dependent again. Perhaps she'd swung too far in the opposite direction. The next morning brought news that her wagon was finally repaired. Barton the blacksmith had not only fixed the axle but reinforced several weak points in the structure. "Should hold up better on those rough trails," he explained, pointing out the improvements. "Made the wheels a bit wider, too, for better stability." "It looks wonderful," Delilah said sincerely. "What do I owe you?" Barton named a sum that seemed suspiciously low. When Delilah questioned it, he shrugged. "Rate's the same for everyone, madam." She was counting out the money when a voice behind her said, "Your mare still needs another week." Delilah turned to find Travis Galloway leading a sturdy bay gelding. "This is Chester. He's steady and knows the trails. He'll pull your wagon until your mare is sound." "I can't accept loan, not a gift," Travis interrupted. "You can return him when your mare's ready." Delilah studied him, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the trail dust coating his clothes. "You look exhausted." Something like surprise flickered across his face at her concern. "Been a long week. Cattle drive to Santa Barbara. Yet you found time to send me that map. And now this." She gestured to the horse. Travis shrugged. "Wasn't much trouble." "Why, though? You don't know me." "Knew Henry," he said simply, as if that explained everything. Perhaps to him it did. Barton cleared his throat. "If you folks are done, I've got other work waiting." Travis handed the bay's reins to Delilah. "Chester's gentle. Won't give you any trouble." Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Delilah felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the California sun. "Thank you, Travis, truly." He nodded once, touched the brim of his hat, and walked away. Delilah watched him go, wondering at the man who seemed determined to help her while simultaneously maintaining his distance. With her wagon repaired and a horse to pull it, Delilah spent the next 2 days preparing for life at her uncle's cabin. She purchased seeds, basic tools, food supplies, and books on farming and animal husbandry. When Mrs. Larson learned of her plans to leave, she insisted on packing a hamper of food to tide you over until you get settled. The evening before her departure, a knock came at the boarding house door. Mrs. Larson answered it and returned with a small wooden crate. "Travis Galloway left this for you," she said, setting it on the table. "Said it was just some essentials." Inside the crate, Delilah found items she hadn't thought to purchase. A coil of sturdy rope, a lantern with extra oil, matches in a waterproof tin, a whetstone for sharpening tools, and packets of herb seeds labeled in a surprisingly neat hand. Beneath these practical items lay a book, the California Farmer's Almanac, with a folded paper tucked inside. She opened it to find a note written in the same neat script as the seed packets. "Miss Evans, these herbs grow well in Henry's garden." The almanac was his. He marked the pages he found most useful. "The rope is for emergencies. Your uncle used to say a good length of rope is worth its weight in gold on a homestead. Safe journey. T.G." Delilah ran her fingers over the words, feeling a connection not just to the man who wrote them, but to the uncle she'd never known. Travis had given her more than supplies. He'd given her a link to her family's past. The morning of her departure dawned clear and mild. Delilah loaded her wagon carefully, securing everything against the bumpy journey ahead. Doc Simmons came to check on her mare one last time, pronouncing her improved but still in need of rest. "I've written out instructions for her care," he said, handing Delilah a paper. "Follow them precisely and she should make a full recovery." "I will. Thank you for everything, Doctor." As she prepared to leave town, several people stopped by to wish her well. Sheriff Wilson gave her a small revolver better suited to a lady's hand than her father's old gun. Mrs. Reynolds from the hotel brought a quilt for those cold nights the cabin can get drafty. Mrs. Larson pressed a jar of her famous peach preserves into Delilah's hands. "You'll need something sweet to remind you of civilization," she said with a wink. Delilah was overwhelmed by the generosity. "I don't know how to thank you all." "Just succeed," Sheriff Wilson said simply. "That'll be thanks enough." With final goodbyes said, Delilah climbed onto the wagon seat and picked up the reins. Chester, true to Travis's word, responded immediately to her commands, pulling the wagon smoothly down the main street of Ventura. At the edge of town, a familiar figure on horseback waited. Travis sat relaxed in the saddle, his sorrel gelding flicking its ears impatiently. "Thought you might want company on the trail," he said as she approached. "First trip can be tricky." Delilah smiled, genuinely pleased to see him. More neighborly assistance, a corner of his mouth lifted in what might almost be called a smile. Something like that. The journey took most of the day. Travis rode alongside the wagon, occasionally pointing out landmarks or warning of rough patches ahead. Their conversation came in comfortable bursts between long stretches of companionable silence. "How long have you been ranching?" Delilah asked during one such exchange. 5 years here. Grew up on a farm in Missouri before the war." "The war changed everything for so many," she observed. Travis nodded, his expression momentarily distant. "Some changes were necessary." She wanted to ask more but sensed his reluctance to discuss the past. Instead, She shared stories of her life in Boston, carefully edited to omit the scandal that had driven her west. "It sounds very civilized," Travis commented after she described the social seasons and cultural events. "Suffocating is another word for it," Delilah admitted. "Everything prescribed, every action judged." "That why you left?" She hesitated, then offered a partial truth. "I wanted to make my own way on my own terms. When I learned about Uncle Henry's property, it seemed like providence." Travis studied her thoughtfully. Henry would have liked that. He came west for the same reason, to live by his own rules, answer to no one but himself and God. They reached the cabin in late afternoon. Travis helped unload the heavier items from the wagon, then showed Delilah the basics of caring for the property, how to work the pump for the well, where the best firewood was stacked, which chimney brick to tap if the flue stuck. As evening approached, Travis prepared to leave. "My ranch is about an hour's ride that way," he said, pointing northwest. "Follow the creek upstream and you'll find it." "I appreciate everything you've done," Delilah said, standing in front of her cabin, her home now. Travis mounted his horse. "There's a pistol loaded in the drawer by the bed. Henry kept it there for emergencies. Know how to use it. My father taught me the basics." He nodded approvingly. "I'll stop by in a few days, see how you're settling in." "You don't need to, neighborly," he reminded her with that almost smile, then turned his horse and rode away. The first night alone in the cabin was both terrifying and exhilarating. Every creak and rustle made Delilah start, but there was also a profound sense of freedom. This space was hers. No judgmental society matrons, no whispers behind fans, no pitying glances from former friends. Just Delilah Evans and the life she would build with her own hands. She spent the next days cleaning and organizing, establishing routines and exploring her property. The work was hard but satisfying. Each night, she fell into bed exhausted but fulfilled. On the fourth day, as promised, Travis returned. He arrived mid-morning leading a cow with a young calf following behind. "Thought you could use fresh milk," he said by way of greeting. "She's gentle, easy to milk. The calf's old enough for partial weaning." Delilah stared at the animals, then at Travis. "This is too much. I can't accept, call it a loan," he suggested, his expression neutral. "Repay me when your farm's producing." She wanted to refuse, to insist on maintaining her independence. But the practical reality was that milk would be enormously beneficial, and purchasing a cow was currently beyond her means. "A loan," she agreed finally, "with interest, if you insist." Travis proceeded to show her how to milk the cow, his strong hands demonstrating the technique with surprising gentleness. Delilah watched carefully, then tried herself. Her first attempts were clumsy, but the cow, whom Travis called Maybelle, was patient. "There you go," Travis encouraged when she finally got a steady stream of milk flowing. "You're a natural." The simple praise warmed Delilah more than it should have. "Hardly, but I'm a quick study." Over the following weeks, Travis stopped by regularly, always with some practical reason, bringing a tool she might need, offering advice on fixing the fence, showing her how to predict weather from cloud patterns. Each visit was brief, his manner reserved but kind. Delilah found herself looking forward to these visits more than she cared to admit. There was something about Travis Galloway that intrigued her, his quiet competence, his understated kindness, the hints of depth behind his reticent exterior. Summer progressed, bringing hotter days and the challenges of maintaining a garden in the dry California climate. Delilah's mare recovered enough to return to light work, and she dutifully returned Chester to Travis, though she missed the steady gelding's reliable presence. In town, which she visited every other week for supplies, people began to treat her as one of their own rather than an outsider. She developed a particular friendship with Mrs. Larson, who invited her to Sunday dinners whenever she was in Ventura. "You're doing what many women only dream of," Mrs. Larson told her one such evening. "Living independently, answering to no one. It's not always easy," Delilah admitted. "The worthwhile things rarely are." Mrs. Larson passed her a plate of apple pie. "And speaking of worthwhile things, I notice Travis Galloway calls on you regularly." Delilah felt her cheeks warm. "Neighborly assistance, that's all." "Of course," Mrs. Larson agreed with a knowing smile. "He's been neighborly with half the county, but I've never seen him ride 15 miles out of his way twice a week to check a fence line for anyone else." This information gave Delilah pause. She'd assumed Travis's ranch duties naturally brought him near her property. The idea that he made special trips specifically to see her was both flattering and unsettling. The next time Travis visited, Delilah found herself watching him more closely, noticing details she'd overlooked before: the way sunlight brought out auburn highlights in his brown hair, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he was amused, the careful precision with which he handled tools and animals. He caught her staring as he repaired a loose board on her porch. "Something wrong?" "No," she said quickly. "Just thank you for everything you've done." Travis seemed momentarily discomfited by her gratitude. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," Delilah insisted. "You've gone well beyond neighborly duty. I want to know why." He returned to hammering the board, not meeting her eyes. "Told you before, Henry was important to me." "There's more to it than that," she pressed, moving closer. "Please, Travis, the truth." He drove the last nail home with perhaps more force than necessary, then straightened, finally meeting her gaze. "Henry Evans saved my life. After the war I was lost, drinking too much, looking for fights, ended up here by chance. Henry found me passed out by the creek one night, brought me to his cabin, got me sober, taught me ranching, helped me buy my land." His voice roughened. "Said everyone deserves a second chance." Delilah's throat tightened with emotion. "He sounds like a remarkable man." He was. Travis gathered his tools. "When I heard his niece was claiming his property, I figured helping you was a way to repay a debt I could never fully settle." "So it's obligation," Delilah said softly, trying to ignore the disappointment that accompanied the realization. Travis shook his head. "Started that way, maybe, not anymore." "What changed?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, his blue eyes intense. "You did. You're stubborn, proud, determined. Remind me of him in some ways, different in others." His gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. "Better ways." The air between them seemed suddenly charged. Delilah was acutely aware of his proximity, of her own quickened heartbeat. "Travis," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. A distant crash of thunder broke the moment. They both looked toward the horizon, where dark clouds were gathering with alarming speed. "Storm coming," Travis said, instantly alert. "A bad one from the look of those clouds. We need to secure everything." The next hour was a flurry of activity. They brought the animals into the barn, reinforced the chicken coop, covered the garden as best they could, and battened down anything that might blow away. By the time they finished, the wind was howling and the first heavy raindrops were falling. "You should stay until it passes," Delilah shouted over the rising storm as they ran for the cabin. "It's not safe to ride in this." Inside, they were breathless and damp. Travis removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair. "Hope the creek doesn't flood. This kind of cloudburst can turn it into a torrent." "Has that happened before?" Delilah asked, lighting a lamp against the prematurely darkened day. "Few times." Travis moved to the window, peering out at the deluge. "Henry's place is high enough, but the trail back to town could get cut off if it's as bad as it looks." The implication settled over Delilah she could be isolated here, possibly for days. Strangely, the thought didn't frighten her as it once might have. She had supplies, shelter, and Travis's guidance. "We should make something to eat," she suggested, moving to the small kitchen area. No sense worrying on an empty stomach. Together, they prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. The domestic activity felt surprisingly natural, as if they'd done this many times before. They worked around each other with an easy coordination that belied their relatively short acquaintance. As they ate by lamplight, the storm raged outside. Rain lashed at the windows and thunder shook the little cabin. Delilah couldn't help jumping at a particularly loud crack. "Storm's right overhead," Travis observed. "Should move east soon." "I've never experienced weather this violent in Boston," Delilah admitted. "The worst we got was nor'easters, and those were mostly snow and wind." "California has its own brand of fury," Travis said. "Beautiful one day, trying to kill you the next. Makes you respect nature." "Is that why you stay?" she asked. Despite the dangers, he considered the question seriously. "Partly, there's a honesty to life here. The land doesn't lie to you. It's hard but fair. You get back what you put in, more or less." "Unlike people," Delilah murmured. "Some people," Travis agreed. "Not all." The conversation drifted to safer topics: the upcoming Harvest Festival in Ventura, the new schoolhouse being built, Travis's plans to expand his herd next spring. Outside, the storm gradually abated, the thunder moving farther away, though the rain continued steadily. "Looks like it's letting up," Travis said, rising to check the window again. "I should head back while there's still some light." "That's ridiculous," Delilah countered. "It's nearly dark, the trails will be treacherous, and the creek could still be dangerous." "You should stay the night and leave at first light." Travis hesitated, clearly weighing propriety against practicality. "People might talk." "Let them," Delilah said with more bravado than she felt. "My reputation survived Boston society. I think it can weather Ventura gossip." Something in her tone made Travis look at her sharply. "What happened in Boston, Delilah?" It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it affected her more than it should have. She took a deep breath, deciding it was time for honesty. "I was engaged to a man from a prominent family." "Edward Blackwell. The match was advantageous for both families. His needed my father's money, ours needed his social connections." She stared into her coffee cup. 3 weeks before the wedding, I discovered he'd been keeping a mistress, a young widow with 2 small children. He supported them financially, but planned to end the arrangement after our marriage. Travis listened intently, his expression unreadable. When I confronted him, he was unapologetic, said it was the way of the world, that I should look the other way as all society wives did. Delilah's voice hardened at the memory. "I refused, broke the engagement publicly at a ball hosted by his mother, created quite the scandal." "Good for you," Travis said quietly. "The aftermath wasn't pretty. His family spread rumors that I was morally deficient, mentally unstable. My friends abandoned me. Even my father was angry not at Edward's behavior, but at my refusal to overlook it. The pain of that betrayal still stung. When he died a few months later, I found myself alone, with a tarnished reputation and limited options." Then came the letter about Uncle Henry's property. Travis was silent for a long moment. "So you came west to escape the scandal?" "I came west to find myself," Delilah corrected. "To discover who Delilah Evans might be when not defined by Boston society's expectations." "And have you?" "Found yourself?" She smiled, feeling lighter for having shared her story. "I believe I'm starting to. I know I'm stronger than I thought, more capable, less concerned with appearances." "Suits you," Travis said simply. The unexpected compliment warmed her. "Your turn," she prompted. Fair exchange. What drove you west after the war? Travis's expression closed slightly, but he answered. Fought for the Union, saw things no man should see, did things. He trailed off, then continued more firmly. When it ended, I couldn't go home. Everything looked the same but felt different. Or maybe I was the one who'd changed. War changes people, Delilah said softly, some for the worse. Travis stared into the fire. Started drifting, working cattle drives, ranch jobs, drinking too much at night to keep the memories at bay. Until you met my uncle, Travis nodded. Henry had fought too in the Mexican War. He understood. Never pushed me to talk, just gave me honest work and expected me to do it well. Gradually, the worst of the demons retreated. Do they ever leave completely? Delilah asked gently. No, Travis admitted, but they get quieter. Some days I hardly hear them at all. The honesty of his confession touched Delilah deeply. This was a side of Travis Galloway few people likely ever saw, vulnerable, reflective, haunted by a past he couldn't change but refused to let define him. Thank you for telling me, she said. Thank you for asking, he replied. Most don't. They sat in companionable silence as the fire burned low. Eventually, Delilah rose to prepare sleeping arrangements. You can take the bed, she insisted. I'll use the cot in the loft. Not a chance, Travis countered. I'll take the floor by the fire. Don't be ridiculous. You're too tall for the floor. You'll be crippled by morning. Been sleeping on the ground since I was 17, he said stubbornly. One more night won't kill me. In the end, they compromised. Travis would take the cot in the loft, Delilah the bed. As she gathered extra blankets, their hands brushed, and that same electric awareness passed between them. Delilah, Travis said, his voice low, I should tell you something. Yes, her heart inexplicably quickened. I didn't come by today just to check on you. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. I came to ask if you'd accompany me to the Harvest Festival next weekend, as my guest. It was such an ordinary request, so conventionally proper after their deeply personal conversations, that Delilah couldn't help but laugh. Travis frowned. If you'd rather not, no, she said quickly. I'd be delighted to attend with you, After everything we've shared tonight, a formal invitation seems charmingly quaint. His expression relaxed. Maybe so, but some conventions are worth keeping. Later, lying in her uncle's bed with Travis just above in the loft, Delilah reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she'd been a disgraced socialite with few prospects. Now she was a landowner, a farmer of sorts, and possibly, just possibly, on the brink of something new and wonderful with a man unlike any she'd known before. Morning brought clearing skies and mud-slicked trails. Travis left after breakfast, promising to return in a few days to check the creek crossing and escort her to town for the festival if the roads were passable. Delilah watched him ride away, a curious mix of emotions swirling within her. She'd never believed in the romantic notion of knowing your heart quickly, but there was something about Travis Galloway that resonated with her on a level she hadn't experienced before. The week passed in a blur of activity. The storm had caused some damage, flattened corn stalks, a section of fence down, the chicken coop roof partially caved in. Delilah tackled each problem methodically, applying the skills she'd learned over the summer. When she couldn't figure something out, she consulted one of the books Travis had provided, determined to manage on her own. True to his word, Travis returned 3 days later. He arrived looking more polished than usual, his hair trimmed, his shirt newer than his everyday work clothes. Creek's down enough to cross safely, he reported. Trail to town is rough in spots but passable. He hesitated, then added, You look well. The work agrees with you. Delilah was suddenly conscious of her appearance, faded work dress, hair hastily pinned up, hands roughened by labor. "I must look a fright." "No," Travis said with unexpected firmness. "You look alive, real." His eyes held hers. "Beautiful." The simple compliment, delivered without flourish or exaggeration, affected Delilah more deeply than the most elaborate flattery from her Boston suitors ever had. "Thank you," she said softly. "Would you like some coffee before we go?" They sat on the porch with their cups, discussing practical matters, which supplies she needed from town, which repairs were most urgent, whether the coming winter was likely to be harsh. "Henry always said you could tell by the thickness of the squirrels' tails," Travis mentioned. Thick and bushy meant cold weather ahead. "And what do the squirrels predict this year?" Delilah asked, enjoying this glimpse of local wisdom. Travis considered. "Average, I'd say. Should be a mild winter, but you'll still need plenty of firewood." He glanced at her woodpile. "I could help you split more before the rains set in for good." "I'd appreciate that," Delilah said, surprising herself with how easily she accepted his offer. 6 months ago, she'd have insisted on managing alone. Now she understood that accepting help when needed wasn't weakness, it was practicality, community, perhaps even friendship, or something more. The Harvest Festival transformed Ventura's town square into a vibrant celebration of local bounty. Stalls displayed fruits, vegetables, preserves, and handicrafts. A small band played lively tunes, and couples danced on a wooden platform erected for the occasion. Arriving with Travis at her side, Delilah was struck by how differently people treated her now. Gone were the curious stares and whispers of her first days in town. Instead, she received warm greetings and genuine smiles. She belonged here now, not as Henry's niece from back east, but as Delilah Evans, a woman making her own way. "Travis Galloway with a lady on his arm now, there's a sight I never thought I'd see," Sheriff Wilson commented good-naturedly as they passed. "You must be special, Miss Evans, to break through that crusty exterior." Delilah felt Travis stiffen slightly beside her, but was surprised when he replied, "She is, Sheriff. More special than she knows." The simple declaration, spoken openly in public, caused a flutter in Delilah's chest. She glanced at Travis, but his expression gave nothing away as he guided her through the crowd. They spent the afternoon exploring the festival, sampling Mrs. Larson's award-winning apple butter, watching the children's sack races, admiring the intricate quilts displayed by the local sewing circle. Throughout it all, Travis remained attentive but reserved, his hand occasionally resting lightly at the small of her back as they navigated the crowds. When the dancing began in earnest, Delilah expected Travis to avoid it. He seemed too private, too contained for such public displays. To her surprise, he turned to her as the band struck up a waltz. "May I have this dance, Miss Evans?" he asked formally, extending his hand. "You dance, Mr. Galloway," she teased, placing her hand in his. "Poorly," he admitted with that almost smile. "But I reckon you can lead without making it obvious." In fact, Travis danced better than he claimed. His movements were perhaps not as polished as those of Boston society men, but he moved with natural grace and confidence, guiding Delilah smoothly around the platform. "You've been holding out on me," she said as they turned. "Where did a rancher learn to waltz?" "My mother insisted all her boys learn the basics," he replied. "Said a man should know how to move with a lady properly, whether in a ballroom or a barn dance." She sounds wise. She was. A shadow crossed his face briefly. "Lost her in '63, influenza." "I'm sorry," Delilah said softly. "Long time ago." But his hand tightened slightly on hers, belying the casualness of his words. As evening approached, lanterns were lit around the square, creating a magical glow. The music slowed, and couples drew closer on the dance floor. Without discussion, Travis and Delilah joined them. This time, when he held her, the proper distance between them diminished until she could feel the warmth of his body, smell the clean scent of soap and leather that she'd come to associate with him. "People are watching," she murmured, though she made no move to increase the space between them. "Let them," Travis said, echoing her words from days earlier. "Unless it bothers you." "No," Delilah realized with some surprise. "It doesn't." When the music ended, Travis didn't immediately release her. For a breathless moment, Delilah thought he might kiss her there in front of the entire town. Instead, he stepped back, though his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her feel as though they were still touching. "It's getting late," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Should I take you back to Mrs. Larson's?" Delilah had planned to stay overnight in town, but suddenly she couldn't bear the thought of ending the evening so conventionally. "Actually, I'd prefer to return to the cabin tonight if the trail is safe." Travis studied her face carefully. "It's safe enough with a lantern." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." The ride back was mostly silent, each lost in their own thoughts. The moon was nearly full, bathing the landscape in silver light and making the lantern almost unnecessary on the open stretches of trail. When they reached the cabin, Travis cared for the horses while Delilah lit the lamps inside. The domestic routine felt natural, as if they'd been doing this together for years rather than a single time during the storm. "I should go," Travis said when the horses were settled, though he made no move toward his own mount. Delilah stood in the doorway, lamplight spilling around her. "You could stay, like before." Her heart pounded at her own boldness. The night trail can be dangerous. Travis took a step toward her, then stopped. "Delilah, if I stay tonight, it won't be in the loft." The directness of his statement sent a thrill through her. This was nothing like the calculated courtship games of Boston, where meanings were veiled in layers of propriety and innuendo. Travis Galloway stated his intentions plainly, leaving the choice entirely in her hands. "I know," she said, holding his gaze steadily. He moved then, crossing the distance between them in a few long strides. His hands framed her face with exquisite gentleness, belying the intensity in his eyes. "Are you certain? There's no going back from this in a small town." "I've never been more certain of anything," Delilah whispered. His kiss was everything she'd imagined and nothing like she'd expected, tender yet urgent, restrained yet passionate. She wound her arms around his neck, drawing him closer as the kiss deepened. When they finally parted, both breathless, Travis rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you standing on that porch in town, too proud to accept help even with blood on your hands." "Why didn't you?" He smiled, a real, full smile that transformed his features. "You'd have slapped me." "Probably," she agreed with a laugh. "I was rather prickly." "Was?" Travis raised an eyebrow teasingly. "Still am," Delilah admitted, pulling him inside and closing the door behind them. The nights grew cooler as autumn deepened into winter. Delilah woke one December morning to find frost patterns on the cabin windows and Travis adding wood to the fire. The sight of him moving comfortably through her space, their space, increasingly filled her with a contentment she'd never known was possible. He'd taken to spending most nights at the cabin, riding to his ranch during the day to tend his cattle and handle business, returning in the evenings with supplies or small gifts, a book he thought she'd enjoy, a jar of honey from a neighbor's hives, once a length of fine blue ribbon that matched her eyes exactly. They hadn't spoken of marriage, though Delilah knew the town assumed it was inevitable. She'd once overheard Mrs. Larson telling another woman, "Those two were made for each other. Stubborn as mules, both of them, but they balance each other somehow." Delilah found herself agreeing with that assessment. Travis's quiet strength complemented her more outspoken nature. His patience tempered her impulsiveness, and beneath his reserved exterior lay a depth of feeling that continually surprised and moved her. "What are you thinking?" Travis asked, noticing her watching him. "That I'm happy," she said simply. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." He came to sit beside her on the bed, taking her hand in his. "Happy enough to make it permanent," Delilah's breath caught. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "Not the most romantic proposal," Travis acknowledged with a rueful smile. "I had something better planned for Christmas, but seeing you this morning looking so peaceful, I couldn't wait." He squeezed her hand. "Delilah Evans, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. 1,000 times yes. His kiss was gentle, reverent, as if sealing a sacred promise. When he pulled away, he reached into his pocket and produced a small ring, a simple gold band with a single pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "My father gave it to her when they decided to move west from Missouri, said the pearl represented their new beginning." He met Delilah's eyes. "Seemed fitting." "It's beautiful," Delilah whispered, tears welling, "and perfect." They were married on New Year's Day, 1879, in Ventura's small church. The entire town turned out for the occasion, along with ranchers and farmers from miles around. Sheriff Wilson stood as Travis's best man, and Mrs. Larson as Delilah's matron of honor. Delilah wore a new dress of deep blue silk, her one concession to her former life of luxury, with her mother's lace veil and Travis's pearl ring. Travis looked almost uncomfortable in his new suit, but managed a full, genuine smile when she walked down the aisle toward him. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with food, music, and dancing at the town hall. When they finally departed for home, both homes now, as they'd decided to maintain both properties, splitting their time between them, the townsfolk lined the street, cheering and throwing rice. "Quite a send-off," Travis commented as they drove the wagon out of town. "Never been the center of so much attention in my life." "Get used to it, Mr. Galloway," Delilah teased. "You've married a woman who refuses to be invisible. Wouldn't want you any other way, Mrs. Galloway." He glanced at her, his expression suddenly serious. "You know, when I saw you that first day, refusing everyone's help, while you just started helping anyway," she finished for him. "I never expected this," Travis admitted. "Never thought I'd find someone who'd understand me, accept me, past and all." "I never expected you either," Delilah said softly. "The quiet cowboy who changed everything by simply doing what needed to be done, asking nothing in return." As they rode toward their future together, Delilah reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought her west. The scandal that had seemed like the end of her life in Boston had actually been the beginning of something far more genuine and fulfilling. Here, with Travis, she wasn't Delilah Evans, the disgraced socialite, but simply Delilah, a woman loved for exactly who she was, stubborn pride and all. The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. Their first child, a son they named Henry after Delilah's uncle, arrived the following winter during a rare Southern California snowstorm. Travis rode through the night to fetch Doc Simmons, nearly freezing in the process, but returning in time for the birth. 2 years later, their daughter Elizabeth joined the family on a warm spring day, arriving so quickly that Travis himself delivered her, with Mrs. Larson providing guidance through the process. They expanded both properties, eventually connecting them by purchasing the land between. Their combined ranch became one of the most prosperous in the area, known for quality cattle and innovative farming techniques that Delilah researched and implemented. When the railroad finally reached Ventura in 1887, bringing increased commerce and prosperity, Travis was elected to the town council, despite his reluctance to take on a public role. Delilah flourished as the town grew, helping establish a proper school and library. Through it all, they maintained the pattern that had defined their relationship from the beginning. Travis quietly doing what needed to be done without fanfare, Delilah accepting his help while fiercely maintaining her own identity and capabilities. On their 20th anniversary, they sat on the porch of the original cabin still maintained, though they'd built a larger family home nearby, watching the sunset over land that had flourished under their care. "You ever regret it?" Travis asked suddenly. "Coming west? Marrying a taciturn cowboy instead of some Boston gentleman?" Delilah took his hand, now weathered and calloused from decades of honest work. "Not for a single moment. Best decision I ever made was accepting the help I didn't ask for, from the man who didn't offer it." Travis smiled, the full, unreserved smile that even after all these years, he reserved only for her and their children. "Glad to hear it, because I plan to keep helping for at least another 20 years, whether you ask for it or not." "I'm counting on it," Delilah said, leaning her head on his shoulder as the last rays of sunlight gilded the land they'd built together, a testament to stubborn pride, quiet strength, and love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings.